One sound, that's all it took, the sharp, echoing crack of skin hitting skin. How long Belarie's palm burned against the stranger's face, marking the exact second her life divided into before and after. The air in the Neon Lotus didn't hum anymore. It stopped. Every conversation cut mid-word. Every glass froze halfway to lips. She stepped back, adrenaline singing through her veins, expecting rage or maybe violent retaliation. Instead, she found something far more terrifying. Stillness. Park Soo-hyun's head had barely turned from the impact. Now it rotated back with the mechanical precision of a predator realigning on prey, his eyes locking onto hers like crosshairs finding their mark. Black and bottomless and absolutely certain of what came next. He was carved from something harder than men were supposed to be made of, not the decorative masculinity of executives who paid for gym memberships, but the brutal economy of someone who'd climbed over bodies to reach the top. His frame dominated the curved leather booth. His silence devoured sound. The tailored lines of his charcoal suit couldn't quite hide what he was, and the ink that disappeared beneath his collar told stories written in violence and blood oaths. His hand rose slowly, not to strike back but to touch the corner of his mouth, where her ring had split the skin. When his fingers came away, there was blood, dark and deliberate under the amber lights sliding down toward his wrist. Fresh blood. His blood because of her. "You have courage," he said, his voice a low rumble that felt like it came from somewhere deep underground. Each word measured and final, like a judge reading a sentence. Or stupidity, I haven't decided which. Kimmie's throat constricted. The leather jacket that had felt like armor 10 seconds ago now seemed thin as tissue. "It was just a dare," she managed, though her voice came out sharper than she intended, defensive where she'd meant to sound casual. "A stupid bar game, that's all." "Just," he repeated, turning the word over like an object he was examining for flaws. Then he moved, not violently, but with the kind of inevitability that made resistance feel pointless before it began. His hand caught her wrist, not painfully, but with the absolute authority of someone who'd never been told no in his life and wouldn't recognize it if he was. The grip was iron wrapped in silk, immovable as gravity. "You don't understand what you've done," he said, his thumb finding the frantic pulse hammering beneath her skin, not pressing, just resting there, counting the proof of her fear. "Let me educate you." She tried to pull back. His grip didn't change, didn't tighten, it simply existed, and her freedom ceased to. "Look, I didn't know who you were." "Now you do." His gaze finally dropped from the middle distance to actually see her, not scanning, not softening, but cataloging, taking inventory of a new asset, a problem that needed categorizing before he decided how to solve it. "And everyone else in this room knows I allowed you to walk up to me, strike me, draw my blood." The lounge around them continued its performance of normalcy. Someone laughed, brittle and too loud. Ice clinked against glass. A woman's heels clicked toward the exit, moving just a fraction too fast. But in their pocket of space, the world had contracted to just the two of them and the invisible noose tightening around Kimmie's neck. He released her wrist, but his hand moved only inches away, settling on the table beside her hip. Close enough that she remained caged by proximity alone, by the sheer mass of his presence blocking any escape route. She noticed details now that her survival instincts were screaming warnings. The way his men had positioned themselves at every exit, the geometric precision of the tattoo crawling up his neck. A dragon's tail, she realized, the small jade ring on his smallest finger that probably cost more than her car. "You're a journalist," he said, and it wasn't a question. "You think you understand the underworld because you write about it. You believe yourself untouchable because you carry a press badge." Kimmie lifted her chin, finding defiance in the only place she had left. Her voice. "I don't scare easy." That earned her something new. Not a smile, but a flicker of something behind those obsidian eyes. Recognition, maybe, or the interest a collector shows when discovering an unexpectedly rare specimen. "You should," he said simply. He studied her for another breath, and she forced herself to study him back. The brutal architecture of his face, the white scar cutting through his left eyebrow that makeup couldn't fully hide, the way he held himself like a blade in its sheath. Ready, but not yet drawn. Then he shifted back, giving her space as if he'd never invaded it, as if the last 2 minutes had been a mutual agreement instead of a violation. "Go back to your table," Park Soo-hyun said, his voice carrying an edge that made every vertebra in her spine lock into alignment. "Enjoy the rest of your evening." He paused, and the pause held more weight than threats. "We'll speak again soon. About payment." Kimmie didn't wait for clarification. She turned and walked back across the lounge, forcing each step to land normally, even though her legs felt like they'd been replaced with something that didn't quite remember how to function. Her heart was trying to break through her ribs, and she could feel his eyes on her back the entire way. Not leering, not angry, just watching, calculating what she was worth, and what it would cost her to settle the debt she didn't know she'd just incurred. The black sedan had been waiting outside the Neon Lotus like a hearse at a funeral. Silent, patient, inevitable. Kimmie hadn't been asked to get in. She'd been guided, firm hands on her shoulders, from men whose faces she couldn't quite remember, who moved like shadows given substance. The drive stretched into silence thick enough to choke on, winding through neighborhoods that grew progressively wealthier until the city lights became sparse and the gates became taller. Park Soo-hyun's estate didn't announce itself with ostentation. It simply existed behind walls that seemed designed to keep out armies. All clean lines and brutal minimalism rendered in stone and steel, the kind of place where beauty was a byproduct of absolute control. He was waiting in what might charitably be called an office. If offices came equipped with floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the city like a kingdom, and furniture that cost more than most people's annual salaries. He stood with his back to her, hands clasped behind him, watching Los Angeles glitter in the distance like scattered diamonds on black velvet. "Do you know what bothers me most about tonight?" His voice cut through the silence without him turning. "Not the disrespect, not the spectacle, the waste." He touched something on the desk. A screen flickered to life on the wall, crisp security footage rendered in stark black and white. Kimmie's breath stopped. Janelle, her sister, unmistakable even in the grainy feed, moving through the Neon Lotus with purpose 3 nights ago, watching her approach Soo-hyun's table during a moment of distraction, watching her hand slip something from beneath a leather portfolio, watching her disappear into the crowd like smoke. "She stole a ledger," Soo-hyun said, finally turning. His face was carved from the same granite as his walls, hard and unforgiving and eternal. One that contains information worth considerably more than her life, or yours. Kimmie's voice emerged raw, stripped of its earlier defiance. "She wouldn't." "She did." He moved closer, each step deliberate. "And she used you as the distraction. The dare was theater, orchestrated. While I was dealing with your performance, she was robbing me blind." The words landed like physical blows. Janelle, her chaotic, beautiful, self-destructive sister, had set her up, had weaponized Kimmie's pride and sent her into the dragon's den as bait. So here we are. Soo-hyun stopped just beyond arm's reach, his presence filling the space between them with suffocating certainty. Your sister owes me a debt she cannot pay. Fortunately, I believe in allowing substitutions. Kimmie forced herself to meet his eyes. What do you want? You. The word dropped between them like a stone into still water, ripples spreading outward into implications she couldn't yet see. You're an investigative journalist. You find things people don't want found, follow threads others can't see. He gestured to the city beyond the windows. Someone in my organization is bleeding me dry, funneling money to my enemies. I need them identified, exposed, eliminated. You'll do this for me. And if I refuse? Park Soo-hyun smiled then, and it was the most terrifying thing she'd seen all night. Then I'll send your sister back to whoever she's running from in pieces small enough to fit in a shoebox. He extended his hand, palm up. An offering, a trap. Choose. The glass office felt like a fishbowl designed by someone who understood that transparency could be its own form of prison. Kimmie sat surrounded by monitors displaying spreadsheets that would make federal prosecutors weep with joy. Each line item a felony rendered in crisp Arial font. Outside the glass walls, Soo-hyun's legitimate business hummed along. Import-export, real estate holdings, venture capital investments that probably fronted for something considerably less legal. Her new title was financial consultant. Her actual role was bloodhound. Soo-hyun had given her 72 hours. 3 days to find a ghost in a machine built on ghosts. Or Janelle's countdown timer hit 0. The ledger her sister had stolen contained names. Names that someone desperately wanted exposed, which meant someone else desperately wanted them buried. Follow the bodies, her old editor used to say. In organized crime, you followed the money to find where the bodies would eventually be. She'd been at it for 18 hours straight, surviving on coffee that tasted like it cost more than her rent and the particular variety of focused rage that came from being betrayed by blood. The numbers swam together, legitimate expenses bleeding into fabricated ones, shell companies nested inside shell companies like Russian dolls made of corporate paperwork. Then she saw it, a pattern. Small withdrawals, never quite large enough to trigger automated flags, routed through what appeared to be operating expenses for various holdings. But the timing was wrong. Payments made on weekends, holidays, times when legitimate business wouldn't be conducted. She cross-referenced dates, pulled up secondary accounts, followed the thread until it led somewhere that made her stomach drop. Hope Harbor Foundation, a local charity serving at-risk youth, tax-exempt, community-beloved, run by a woman who'd been featured in the Times for her humanitarian work, and completely, elaborately fake. $20 million over 18 months, laundered through donation-matching programs and grant disbursements that existed only on paper. The money went in clean, came out cleaner, and disappeared into accounts she'd need considerably more time and considerably less legal oversight to trace further. She was still staring at the screen when Soo-hyun's reflection appeared in the glass behind her. He moved like a predator even in his own territory, silent until he chose to be heard. "Tell me you found something," he said, and there was an edge beneath the words that suggested her sister's well-being depended heavily on her answer. Kimmie turned, meeting his eyes with the first genuine confidence she'd felt since the sedan had collected her. Hope Harbor Foundation. It's a shell. Someone's using it to wash your money and send it somewhere you can't follow. She pulled up the documentation, watching his expression shift from neutral to something darker. 20 million, give or take, routed through fake youth programs and scholarships that don't exist. The foundation director is probably a paid accomplice or a complete fabrication. Soo-hyun leaned over her shoulder, close enough that she could smell sandalwood and something sharper underneath. His finger traced the screen, following the money trail with the focus of someone reading a death warrant. Who authorized the initial donations? His voice had gone very quiet. Kimmie highlighted the signatures. These 3 executives, all approved within 48 hours of each other. One of them is the leak, he said, straightening, or all 3 are conspirators. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. Not warmth, but acknowledgement, recognition of capability. You just bought your sister 3 more days, Park Soo-hyun said. Now find me which one is trying to destroy me. The apartment building looked worse in daylight, 3 stories of peeling paint and broken dreams in a neighborhood where hope went to die. Kimmie took the stairs 2 at a time, rage propelling her upward until she was hammering on the door of Unit 2C with enough force to bruise her knuckles. The door opened on the 3rd knock, revealing Janelle in an oversized sweatshirt and the kind of exhaustion that came from running on borrowed time. Kimmie, her sister's voice cracked on the name. You shouldn't be here. You set me up. The words came out flat, drained of the fury that had carried her here. You sent me to slap a mafia boss while you robbed him. Do you have any idea what you've done? Janelle's face crumpled, and suddenly she looked exactly like she had at 7 years old, caught stealing cookies and knowing punishment was coming. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. Not when the Red Lotus Triad has photos of you moving product for them 5 years ago. Janelle's voice rose, sharp with desperation. Not when they threaten to send those photos to the feds unless you steal from the one man in this city more dangerous than they are. The words hung in the stale air of the apartment, rearranging everything Kimmie thought she understood. She pushed past her sister, pacing the small living room like a caged animal. What product? What are you talking about? I was young and stupid and in debt. Janelle wrapped her arms around herself. They offered me $5,000 to drive a car from Long Beach to Koreatown. I didn't ask what was in the trunk. By the time I figured it out, they had documentation, photos, proof that would put me away for a decade. So you stole from Park Soo-hyun. They wanted that ledger, said it contained information that would cripple his operation. Janelle's laugh was brittle glass. They told me when to go, where to sit, exactly how long I'd have while you distracted him. They choreographed everything. Kimmie stopped pacing, pieces sliding into place with sickening clarity. The dare. Someone at our table suggested it. Marcus Chen, he's Red Lotus. I didn't know until yesterday when he showed up here wanting to know why I hadn't delivered the ledger yet. Janelle's hands were shaking now. I couldn't do it, Kimmie. I couldn't give them something that would get you killed when Soo-hyun found out I'd given it away. The apartment felt smaller suddenly, walls closing in. Kimmie understood with crystalline certainty what she was caught in. Not just Soo-hyun's web, but a war zone. 2 syndicates circling each other like sharks, and she was bleeding in the water between them. Where's the ledger now? Hidden, safe. Janelle met her eyes. But they're getting impatient. Soo-hyun wants his property back. The triads want what I stole, and I'm the idiot who thought I could play both sides. We, Kimmie corrected quietly. We're the idiots. She pulled out her phone, staring at the number. Soo-hyun had programmed into it before she'd left his estate. 1 call, and she could tell him everything. 1 call, and Janelle would be delivered to him like a package marked for destruction. 1 call, and maybe, she could negotiate both their survivals. Or 1 call, and she'd be admitting she'd found the ledger's location, making herself valuable enough to keep alive, but expendable enough to use as bait. What are you going to do? Janelle whispered. Kimmie looked at her sister, reckless, damaged, desperate Janelle who dragged them both into hell with the best of intentions and the worst of judgment. I'm going to find a way to burn them both, she said, before they burn us first. The underground auction existed in the kind of space that shouldn't exist, a converted warehouse beneath the fashion district where the city's elite came to buy things that couldn't be purchased in daylight. Art stolen from museums, antiquities looted from war zones, information that could topple governments. Kimmie descended the steel staircase on Soo-hyun's arm, wrapped in a dress that cost more than her car and felt like wearing liquid midnight. "Victor Zhao will be here," Soo-hyun murmured against her ear, his breath warm enough to raise goosebumps along her neck. To anyone watching, they were lovers sharing intimacies. To Kimmie, it was reconnaissance delivered in a voice that made her spine straighten involuntarily. "He's one of the 3 executives with donation authorization. If he's the leak, he'll make contact with his triad handler tonight. And if he's not, then we eliminate a variable and move to the next name." His hand settled at the small of her back, possessive and burning through thin silk. "Stay close. Couples draw less attention than singles." They moved through the crowd like dancers who'd rehearsed this intimacy, his body a constant presence at her side. He introduced her as his companion to men whose faces she'd seen in her investigation files. Crime lords and corrupt politicians mingling over champagne that probably cost more than evidence of their sins. She smiled and played her part, leaning into Soo-hyun when expected, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, becoming exactly what these men expected to see, beautiful decoration on a powerful man's arm. Except his hand never strayed inappropriately. His touches remained courteous even in their deception. And when Victor Zhao appeared across the room, Soo-hyun pulled her closer with a possessiveness that didn't feel entirely manufactured. "He's moving toward the east corridor," she whispered, tracking Zhao's path through her peripheral vision. "Then we follow." Soo-hyun turned her into his arms as if they were dancing, though no music played. "But slowly, we can't appear too interested." They swayed together in manufactured intimacy, close enough that she could feel his heartbeat against her cheek, steady, unhurried, revealing nothing of whatever he actually felt. His cologne was subtle and expensive, sandalwood underlaid with something darker that she was beginning to associate with danger. "You're good at this," he observed, his voice dropping lower. "Pretending." "So are you." She tilted her head back to meet his eyes, finding something there that made her breath catch. Not the cold calculation she'd expected, but heat, recognition, the acknowledgement of a connection neither of them wanted, but both felt pulling taut between them like a wire under tension. "Who says I'm pretending?" Park Soo-hyun said, and then his mouth was on hers. The kiss wasn't gentle, it was claiming, strategic, designed to sell their cover to anyone watching. But somewhere between the first pressure of his lips and the moment his hand came up to cup her jaw, strategy became something considerably more dangerous. She kissed him back, tasting expensive whiskey and dark promises, feeling herself fall into something she couldn't name and shouldn't want. When he pulled back, his eyes had gone molten. "Zhao just disappeared into a private room," he said roughly. "We need to move." The penthouse windows exploded inward at 3 a.m., glass transforming into 1,000 glittering projectiles that turned luxury into a war zone. Kimmie hit the floor on instinct, years of covering gang violence in South Central, translating into muscle memory that saved her life. The assassin came through the breach like smoke given form, suppressed pistol sweeping the room with professional efficiency. Soo-hyun moved faster than someone his size had any right to, clearing the distance between them before Kimmie could scream. He slammed into her, driving them both behind the marble kitchen island as bullets punched through expensive furniture with soft, deadly whispers. She felt his body jerk once, twice, heard his sharp intake of breath that meant pain. "Are you hit?" Her hands found wetness spreading across his shoulder, dark and hot against white shirt cotton. Flesh wound. His voice was tight, controlled, betrayed only by the tremor in his gun hand as he returned fire. Stay down. The firefight lasted 90 seconds that felt like 90 hours. Soo-hyun's men arrived through the main entrance, their weapons considerably less subtle than the assassins. When the smoke cleared, the would-be killer was dead on the imported Italian tile, and Soo-hyun was bleeding through Kimmie's improvised pressure bandage at a rate that suggested the wound was considerably more than flesh. "Hospital," she said, already pulling out her phone. His hand clamped over hers, slick with his own blood. "No hospitals, they'll be watching." His face had gone gray beneath his tan, sweat beading his forehead. "Anyone I take you to, the triads will have bought or threatened. Then you'll bleed out." But even as she said it, her mind was racing through alternatives. 5 years covering the criminal underworld had taught her things journalism school never mentioned, like witch doctors, operated out of Chinatown basements for clients who couldn't afford questions. "I know someone. Dr. Park, no relation. He patches up gangbangers who can't go to county." "How far?" 20 minutes if we avoid main streets." She was already moving, helping him to his feet with strength she didn't know she possessed. "Can you walk?" "I can do whatever's necessary." But his weight against her told a different story, heavy and increasingly unsteady. They took the service elevator down, Kimmie supporting most of his considerable mass as he bled through layers of makeshift bandaging. Her Honda was still in the underground garage where she'd left it that morning, a lifetime ago when she'd arrived for another day of playing financial detective. Now she was playing getaway driver for a mafia boss who was painting her passenger seat crimson. She drove like she'd learned in East LA, taking alleys that didn't appear on GPS, cutting through parking lots and side streets that turned the city into a maze only locals could navigate. Soo-hyun stayed conscious through sheer force of will. His hand pressed against the wound, his breathing increasingly labored. "Why are you doing this?" he asked as she took a corner hard enough to make the tires scream. "Because if you die, so does my sister." But the words felt hollow even as she said them, insufficient explanation for the terror that had seized her chest when she'd seen him bleeding. "And because nobody else is going to." Dr. Park's clinic was exactly where she remembered, beneath a noodle shop that had been serving the same families for 40 years. She half-carried Soo-hyun downstairs, slick with years of accumulated grime, pounding on a reinforced door until it opened to reveal an elderly man whose expression suggested he'd seen everything twice and been unimpressed both times. "Gunshot," Kimmie said simply. "He pays cash and you forget his face." Dr. Park looked at Soo-hyun, recognition flickering briefly before professional. Detachment reasserted itself. "Bring him in, and pray I can stop the bleeding before he runs out of blood to lose." The recovery room smelled like antiseptic and old regrets, a converted storage space where Dr. Park kept patients who needed to disappear for a few hours. Soo-hyun lay on a cot that was too small for his frame, his shoulder wrapped in professional bandaging that had finally stopped seeping red. The anesthesia had worn off an hour ago, leaving him caught in that vulnerable space between sedation and full consciousness, where truth came easier than lies. Kimmie sat in a folding chair beside him, her dress ruined with his blood, watching the rise and fall of his chest like it was the only thing anchoring her to reality. She should have left, should have called his people and disappeared back into her own life. Instead, she stayed, keeping vigil over a man who'd threatened her sister and conscripted her into service. "My father built the White Tiger Syndicate," Soo-hyun said, suddenly his voice rough with pain and something deeper. "Then he got sloppy, started sampling his own product, making deals with his heart instead of his head. The other families smelled weakness. Kimmie leaned forward. "You don't have to." I was 23 when they came for him. His eyes stayed fixed on the water-stained ceiling, seeing something she couldn't. I watched them execute him in our own home, my mother, my younger brother. They made me watch before they told me I had a choice: take over and consolidate power, or join my family in the ground. So you became the dragon. I became what I had to become. He turned his head to look at her finally, and the nakedness in his gaze made her chest tighten. I burned out every soft part of myself until all that remained was sharp edges and survival instinct. It's the only way to rule men who respect nothing but fear. That's not true. The words came out before she could stop them. Tonight, you could have let that bullet hit me, used me as a shield. You didn't. Tactical error. But there was no conviction in it. Bullshit. Kimmie stood, pacing the small room, because sitting still meant feeling things she wasn't ready to name. You want everyone to think you're a monster, but monsters don't take bullets for journalists they've blackmailed into service. And what about you? Soo-hyun's voice sharpened despite his weakened state. You hide behind your press badge, claiming moral superiority while you chase stories in places that would terrify most people. You're addicted to the darkness, Kimmie. You just won't admit it. The accusation landed like a physical blow because it was true. She'd been chasing danger since her first investigative piece, drawn to the violence and corruption like a moth to flame, telling herself it was about truth and justice when really it was about the high, the adrenaline, the feeling of walking the knife's edge between observer and participant. I'm nothing like you, she said, but the words lacked conviction. No. He pushed himself up despite the pain it obviously cost him, his dark eyes pinning her in place. You're exactly like me. You just haven't accepted it yet. The space between them felt charged, dangerous, like the moment before lightning strikes. Kimmie could feel herself standing at a precipice, could feel the old version of herself, the one who believed in clear lines between right and wrong, crumbling away. I should go, she whispered. You should. Soo-hyun's hand caught hers, his grip weak but deliberate. But you won't. And God help her, he was right. The files arrived at 4 a.m., delivered to Kimmie's apartment by courier in a plain envelope that contained enough evidence to dismantle empires. She spread the documents across her kitchen table, cross-referencing phone records with financial transactions, with surveillance photos, until the pattern emerged like a constellation she'd been too close to see. Jin Park, Soo-hyun's second-in-command for the past 7 years, his most trusted advisor, the man who'd stood at his right hand through territory wars and business expansions and every bloody decision that had built the White Tiger Syndicate into what it was. The mole had been there all along, close enough to touch, but the betrayal ran deeper than simple embezzlement. Kimmie traced the money through its laundering cycle and found it flowing into accounts connected to Port Authority contracts, development deals, shipping manifests that would give whoever controlled them dominion over every illicit import on the West Coast. And sitting at the center of it all, his signature on authorization forms and permits, was Commissioner Raymond Miller, her mentor, the man who'd given her first real break in journalism, who'd leaked her information on corrupt politicians and dirty cops, who'd always positioned himself as the last honest man in Los Angeles. He'd been playing both sides, using Jin to destabilize Soo-hyun while positioning himself to absorb the White Tiger Syndicate's territory the moment it collapsed. The triads weren't the real threat. They were a distraction, a convenient enemy that kept Soo-hyun looking outward, while the knife came from inside his own organization. Kimmie's hands shook as she photographed the evidence, uploading it to 3 separate encrypted drives because paranoia had become survival instinct. She needed to tell Soo-hyun, needed to warn him before Jin made his move. But telling him meant admitting her connection to Miller, meant revealing that her clean past was built on information from a corrupt cop who'd been using her to publish stories that served his agenda. Her phone rang, Soo-hyun's name on the display. "I need you at the estate." His voice was steady, recovered from his injury with the resilience of someone who'd learned to compartmentalize pain. "Jin has called an emergency meeting of the inner circle. Something about the triad situation. Escalating. Don't go." The words erupted from her before strategy could temper them. "Soo-hyun, it's him. Jin is the mole." Silence stretched across the line, heavy with implications. When he spoke again, his voice had gone very quiet. "Explain." She told him everything. The money trail, the Port Authority connections, Miller's involvement, the years of careful positioning that had put Jin close enough to deliver a killing blow. She heard Soo-hyun's breathing change, heard the moment when betrayal transformed into cold fury. "How long have you known about Miller?" Each word precise, controlled, deadly. "I just found out tonight, I swear." Her throat felt tight. "He fed me stories for years. I thought he was trying to clean up the city. I didn't know that you were his propaganda machine." Not accusatory, just factual, which somehow made it worse. "Did he send you to me?" "No." Then, with the honesty he'd demanded from her in that recovery room, "I don't know, maybe everything has been orchestrated from the beginning." Another silence, this one calculating possibilities, measuring trust against evidence. "Jin called the meeting for 7 tonight. That gives us 14 hours to decide how this ends. We need to get you somewhere safe. I'm not running from my own second in command." The dragon had returned to his voice, cold and absolute. "We're going to that meeting, and you're going to help me burn everyone who thought they could take what's mine." "This is insane." "This is war," Soo-hyun corrected, "and you just chose which side you're on." The headline hit the morning edition like a bomb. "Investigative journalist turned criminal accomplice. Kimmie Belarie's fall from grace." Her own newspaper, the publication she'd bled for during 5 years of dangerous reporting, had published her obituary with her byline photo and everything. Anonymous sources placed her at crime scenes. Financial records, fabricated but convincing, showed payments from shell companies connected to the White Tiger Syndicate. Security footage, real but strategically edited, showed her entering Soo-hyun's estate repeatedly over the past weeks. Her phone started ringing at 6 a.m. and didn't stop. Her editor, former colleagues, sources who'd trusted her with their stories, all calling to ask if it was true or to tell her she was dead to them. By noon, the press had gathered outside her apartment building like vultures waiting for confession or denial, neither of which would save her now. Kimmie sat on her couch, staring at the article on her laptop screen, understanding with crystalline clarity what had been done to her. Soo-hyun had burned her bridge home, had transformed her from observer to participant, from journalist to criminal, eliminating any possibility of retreat back into her old life. The knock on her door came at 2 p.m. She knew who it would be before she opened it. Soo-hyun stood in her hallway, immaculate in a charcoal suit, his recently injured shoulder showing no sign of weakness. Behind him, 2 of his men waited with the patient stillness of professionals doing a job they'd done 1,000 times before. "You destroyed me," Kimmie said, her voice empty of everything but exhaustion. "I freed you." He stepped inside without invitation, closing the door on the watching guards. Your old life was a cage you'd convinced yourself was freedom. The press badge, the moral authority, the belief that you were different from the people you reported on. All lies you told yourself to justify your addiction to darkness. You had no right. I had every right. His voice was iron wrapped in silk. You chose this path when you discovered Jin's betrayal and decided to warn me instead of running to your precious Commissioner Miller. You chose it when you saved my life instead of letting me bleed out. You've been choosing it every day since you walked into the Neon Lotus. He moved closer, his presence filling her small apartment, making it feel even smaller. Tonight we end this. Jin, Miller, everyone who thought they could build empires on our backs. But I need to know you're all in. No reservations. No secret plan to turn evidence over to the authorities once this is finished. Kimmie looked at the laptop screen, at her ruined reputation rendered in 14-point font, at the career she'd built for years, destroyed in a single morning, at the person she'd been, now impossible to resurrect. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, and felt the last thread connecting her to her old self finally snap. Soo-hyun smiled, dangerous and approving. "Bring your recorder. We're going to get Miller to confess everything before we kill him." The shipyard smelled like rust and salt water and the particular variety of decay that came from things left to rot beside the ocean. Commissioner Miller arrived at midnight, flanked by 2 plainclothes officers who were definitely not on any legitimate police roster. Kimmie stood beneath a broken streetlight, visible and alone, exactly as she'd promised when she'd called him 3 hours earlier, claiming she had evidence that would bring down Soo-hyun's entire organization. "Kimmie." Miller's voice carried fatherly concern that would have fooled her a week ago. "Thank God you called me. When I saw that article, I knew something was wrong." "You leaked it." She kept her voice steady, the recorder in her jacket pocket capturing every word. "You destroyed my career to isolate me." "That's absurd. I'm trying to help you." He moved closer, his officers fanning out in a pattern that was tactical rather than protective. "Where's the evidence you mentioned?" "Right here." She pulled out a USB drive, holding it up in the dim light. "Financial records proving Jin Park has been embezzling from Soo-hyun and funneling money into Port Authority contracts. Contracts you authorized." Miller's expression flickered, concern cracking to reveal calculation beneath. "You don't understand what you're involved in. Park Soo-hyun is a cancer on this city. Jin and I have been working to cut it out." "By becoming the cancer yourselves." Kimmie took a step back, drawing him forward. "You used Jin to destabilize the White Tiger Syndicate so you could absorb his territory. You used me to publish stories that served your agenda. You orchestrated everything. Someone has to control the underworld." Miller's voice hardened, the mask falling away completely. "Better me than animals like Soo-hyun who answer to no one. I bring order, structure. I can be reasoned with." "You can be bought." Soo-hyun's voice cut through the darkness like a blade, and suddenly the shadows around them weren't empty anymore. His men materialized from behind shipping containers and rusted machinery, a dozen armed professionals who'd been waiting with predatory patience. That's not the same thing. Miller reached for his weapon, but Soo-hyun was already moving, covering the distance with frightening speed. The commissioner's gun clattered across wet concrete as Soo-hyun's hand closed around his throat, lifting him onto his toes with casual brutality. "You thought you could take what's mine," Soo-hyun said, his voice devoid of emotion, rendered more terrifying by its complete lack of anger. "My organization, my territory, my city." His eyes found Kimmie across the space between them. "My woman." The possessiveness in those 2 words should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like recognition, like a crown she'd been avoiding accepting finally settling onto her head. The recorder, Soo-hyun said without looking away from Miller's purpling face. Do you have what you need? Kimmie pulled out the device, checking the levels. Miller's confession was crystal clear, documented with the same thoroughness she'd once used to expose corrupt politicians. Except this time, the evidence would never see a courtroom. I have everything, she confirmed. Soo-hyun's hand tightened, and Miller's struggles intensified, became frantic, then gradually stilled. When the body dropped to the concrete, the two officers who'd arrived with him were already dead, Soo-hyun's men efficient and professional in their execution. The shipyard fell silent except for the lap of waves against rotting pilings. Kimmie should have felt horror, should have felt something other than the cold satisfaction settling in her chest. Instead, she pulled her press badge from her pocket, the one she'd carried for 5 years as proof of her identity and purpose, and lit it with the Zippo she'd taken from Miller's body. The laminated plastic caught slowly, melting rather than burning, dripping onto the concrete like her old life dissolving into nothing. Soo-hyun watched her perform this small funeral, his expression unreadable in the darkness. No going back now, he said. I don't want to go back. Kimmie dropped the burning badge, watching it curl into ash. I want to go forward, with you. He crossed to her, his hands finding her face with unexpected gentleness, tilting her chin up so she had to meet his eyes. You understand what you're choosing, what you're becoming. The dragon's shadow, she said, and the title felt right in her mouth. The woman who stands beside you, not as a captive, not as a victim, as your equal. His kiss tasted like power and darkness, and terrible, perfect inevitability. Thank you for staying until the end. That means more than you think. If this story touched something inside you, subscribe, like, and tell me what you felt in the comments. I read every single one because this isn't just storytelling, it's connection. And if you're ready for the next journey, don't wander too far. The next story is already waiting in the dark.